about 1,000 Ray works, all told.
We have 217.
So we got way more than they do. So, he who dies with the most Rays wins. Anyway, our collection is about 400 works in color, about 200 drawings, and about 300 photographs and glass plate negatives. It's my hope that someday we can publish a book on Mr. Ray's photography, because his frontier photography is quite exemplary, particularly because of the places he went, like visiting Charles Goodnight in 1893 and going up into Indian Territory and photographing Quanah Parker and at least one of his wives on one of those trips. Now, in my work, I've come to realize that there are kind of three distinct categories of Mr. Ray's work. There's the standard, that's a bad way to put it, 3.5 by 7, what he called a sketch. That's what he called it. And he was very specific about where he wanted his sketches to go. And then there's what I would say is like the medium-sized picture, about this wide. Laptop size. Oh my God. I'm an technophobe, don't throw that at me. And then you get here. And then you get here. Okay? Now I get real emotional about Mr. Ray. Sorry. Collectors call me all the time. Where are they? And I said they're in public collections, except for a handful. And I actually, and I said this before, dealers call me all the time, auction houses call me all the time. And I work with you because it's my job. I have an obligation to you as a public servant to tell you what I know. That's what I do. But when this came up, I honestly was shocked. I really was. Because it had been lent to the Texas and Pacific Railway by 1893. Mr. Ray's handwritten ledger says that he sketched it in 1892. From the landscape, it appears to me it's probably Palo Pinto or Young County. That was a favorite place for him to go. He went out to the area near Eliasville all the time, along the Clear Fork of the Brazos. And what I believe is this is the Brazos Valley right here. There are breaks there, but they're lower than if you go further west into the Caprock, okay? We're out where I live, because the Caprock is higher. It's much, much higher. But there are canyon lands along the Brazos. And near Eliasville, and if Mark Bateman were here, he'd hiss and boo at me because I convinced him to go out there because it looks a little like Europe if you squint your eyes. I think it does. I think it's cool, but I'm a West Texan. But in any case, this is probably the Clear Fork of the Brazos. The cowboy was actually lifted, and in this case it's a sheepherder, was actually lifted from his 1889 painting, Watering the Herd. That very same cowboy appears in that. Mr. Ray didn't do human figures very well or very often, okay? His horses aren't very good either. But we do know he studied cattle and sheep anatomy when he was a young artist and learning how to paint. He really didn't make much distinction between a longhorn or a shorthorn or a sheep, because he painted what he saw. Now, Hollywood has convinced us that the cowboys and the sheepherders all hated each other. I'm here to give you a little hint. Even Charles Goodnight raised sheep. Uh-oh. Ranchers will do anything to learn a living. Crossbreed buffalo, raise sheep, bring elk out to your menagerie, it doesn't matter. So that flies in the face, and I've heard it since I've been here, is that's really not a legitimate Frank Ray painting because it doesn't have cows in it. Nothing infuriates me more than to hear it's all about the cows. Now, I like cows. They make good cheeseburgers. But this is what Mr. Ray saw and experienced. And what he was doing beginning in 1883 when he takes his first trip to western Texas is he brings back information very much like previous landscape painters, previous ethnologers like George Catlin. And then you may think Michael's really getting crazy here, comparing Frank Ray to George Catlin. This part of West Texas, there weren't any painters going out there in 1883. And he just kept going. And that's what you'll see in other artists who have attempted to emulate him, or to follow in his footsteps, or to go to those places. It does something to the artist. And hopefully some of you will come to Bill Reeves' gallery a little bit later, and you'll see the results of that, what that landscape will do to you. I felt I had to talk to tell you all about this painting, because we don't get this opportunity very often, especially when it's something that we don't say grace over, right, Peter?
Indeed.
So that's why we like to borrow things, because we get to see fresh stuff. Now, when I get crazy at my job, I go into the vault, and I have one board member here, and I hope he doesn't rat me out. If you can't find me, I'm usually in the vault looking at the regs, because they're lined up like little books, and I get to pull one out. I get to do that. That's the great fringe benefit of my job. So I felt an obligation to share some of that information with you. This is the last great one. I know of no other. Mr. Ray would lend his paintings for promotional purposes like the Texas and Pacific Railway, and they traveled it around for a couple of years. It appeared in his major one-man exhibition in St. Louis. It appears again at the, I believe it's the 7th annual American Artists, and this was countrywide at the Art Institute of Chicago. It has great exhibition chops. It has some conservation problems, of course. Pastel is always risky. But Mr. Ray was a good craftsman. That's why this thing didn't fall apart. It has some water damage, largely because people don't know how to care for a pastel. It probably lived in a shadow box frame. This is not the original frame. What did you say, Peter?
Yeah, the shadow box frames were at least 4 to 6 inches thick, made out of wood, oak, very durable, and a must-do if you're traveling pastel all over the country.
And also to protect a lot, and they really were for the gilded frames because of all the compo work to keep you out. And Mr. Ray didn't do that. Typically his paintings are framed in either gray-green or a buff. And this is why when you mat them, do not put them in a white mat. You kill it. Don't do that. Find buff or gray-green. It looks weird to you at first, but I tell you what, that painting will pop. That's why this linen liner, you notice just covering it up there, the value change is dramatic. So, this is the last great one. And I'm not trying to say that to you. I'm just saying if you haven't given it a good look, you as Texas collectors, whether you can afford it or not, study this painting. Study this painting. Study Mr. Ray, because he's one of the pillars. Yeah, I'm a homer. I'm sorry. I'm a homer. I didn't talk about him too much today, but I felt an obligation to at least share a little bit of this with you. I hope you learned a little bit of something about him. Yeah, he loved his longhorns, but remember, on his placard, it says landscape and cattle painter. And that's what Peter's done in his exhibition. It's about the landscape of the American West in which sheep and cattle live. Thanks a lot.